Welcome to Bring Me My Books. I'm Kristi Cain,
I'm Travis Lowe.
and we are your hosts. And we are here, Travis. This is our last book episode. We do think we have a couple more fun bonus episodes coming up that we are actually not going to tell you about yet. They're going to be surprises. But it's our last episode to talk about our last book of our first year of Bring Me My Books. And so we've been discussing Humble Roots by Hannah Anderson, who is a dear friend of yours, but and also a very what's the word? Successful. I'm looking for a different word. I can't think of
Yeah.
it. Author and writes for Christianity Today, has written several books, Bible study, devotional, Advent book, children's book. Like, she's done a lot of stuff. And she's also been your partner, which I know we're going to talk a little bit about later, partner in this whole conference business that you've been doing. So, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but we always start before we get into the book talking about what's going on in our life. So I'll let you begin. If you want to mention
Yeah.
that, great. Or if you want to save it for later, that's fine too.
Yeah. As we're recording, probably when the episode comes out, Painters, Prophets, Poets will be over, but we're in the last few days, really, the last final stage of getting ready for that conference. We're bringing in artists and poets and theologians to Oklahoma City just to just to try to stir our imagination, to imagine a new future, to dream new dreams, to inspire hope. And I'm so excited. I've been talking with some of the authors that are coming in, and I just love doing this. I am thrilled, but I'm in the stage where there's a lot of stress, making sure that we have
Yeah.
everything done and everything in line. But it's such a joy. So um, hopefully, when this comes out, we would be able to say that it's been a tremendous time together in Oklahoma City. But um, it's been just a super time for me. I'm kind of new to Oklahoma City. I've been here a couple of years or so, but even through this process, I've met so many people,
Mm.
um, made so many connections. It's been a tremendous experience.
It's been really fun to see how our circles have unexpectedly overlapped as you've been doing this, as you've been
Yeah,
preparing for this conference, from the bookstore to the church that's hosting the conference. That's where my are the kids, well, my kids, well, actually only one now, goes to the Academy of Classical Christian Studies in their Midtown campus. That's where the conference is. And so I don't know, these places that I wouldn't expect to find mutual friends with you, like all of a sudden we end up talking
yeah.
about the same people. So that's been really fun. I can't wait for the conference. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. And
So,
something else just came to my mind. This is the last book of the year. And what a year it's been. Y'all kind of went with me and kind of heard my story, some health issues and things like that. But I think back we started this podcast and we called it Bring Me My Books, based on a scripture where Paul found himself in prison in a
mm,
very dark place in a very hard time. And his request was, bring me my books and bring me my cloak. And I believe that those things brought comfort to Paul, but I think those things have brought comfort to me this year. I think this podcast has been a thing that has kept me reading. Sometimes you can feel like you have too much going on, but books are something that brings me comfort, that grounds me, that speaks God's word to me. And all of these books have been sources of joy and hope, um, and and I think that's kind of neat. I think that's what Paul was looking for, and I think that's what I found this year too.
mm. Thanks for sharing that. Um, there's a lot to be grateful for with um, and seeing, as an outside observer, watching you and Jesse kind of walk through this. We're talking a lot about trust with this book, and really it's dependence on God. And I think that there's been a lot of people who have also been encouraged to watching the two of you place your trust in Christ, and then live out that gratitude when you know and I know not everyone, like not everyone's story, and that doesn't mean that God is not at work, and I don't want to
Right.
insinuate that at all, but even before you knew what was going to happen, I think that people, because people loved you guys and care about you and care about your family and wanted desperately for things to go well. We were watching you, not necessarily, but then yeah, I'll just say it was an encouragement to our faith to see the dependence that you guys placed on Christ and kept going back to him for that during that time. So
Thank
thank you.
you.
But okay, well, let's
That
jump in.
wasn't planned. I didn't tell
No,
you
it
about
wasn't.
that.
It wasn't, but I think it's very appropriate. I'm glad that you mentioned that. So, all right, let's talk about this last section. And I think what we said was, we're going to try to keep it to a minimum. We're going to try not to talk about everything that we love because if we do, we'll be here all day. So we both said that probably our favorite chapters maybe were the last two, 10 and 11. So um, I'll just start and then if you want it. So chapter 10, there was thorns and thistles. And I found this chapter fascinating because I learned some things about scripture that I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize, like she says on page 175, throughout scripture, thorns illustrate the brokenness of the world. And then she quotes Genesis 3:17 and 18. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. And then I'm going to jump ahead. And I almost there's a part of me that's like, should I even say this? Because I kind of want people to have the same moment that I had.
Right.
I guess I'm going to.
Spoiler alert. So turn this off if you don't want to hear it.
Exactly. If you want to read this and maybe hopefully have a similar, because I have written in my book beside this on page 184. Whoa. That's what I actually wrote with a big exclamation point. And then she brings it, from Genesis to Christ and his crucifixion. And she says, do not underestimate the significance of this crown of thorns. This was not simply a way to inflict pain, to press barbs into his profoundly human flesh. This was an attempt to humiliate him and mock him. What better way to diminish the king of the universe than to crown him with the very curse that hangs over creation? And then to drop down, because I won't just keep reading this, but it is from these very thorns that Jesus proves his power. It is from these very thorns that he shows how humility overcomes the brokenness. But to make that connection between the thistles and the thorns in Genesis and relate that to the fall, and then see that that is the very thing they placed on his head to humiliate him. And then but then we know the rest of the story that then through the resurrection, his humility, that was broken. I don't know. I don't think I can really fully express what went on in my mind at that moment and what a beautiful aha moment it was for me. But definitely one of my favorite parts of the book.
Yeah, there's a philosophy of religion professor at Oklahoma University, Yugen Nagasawa. And he wrote a book called The Problem of Evil for Atheists. And he says that in philosophy, that atheists will often use the problem of evil as a way to convince people to not believe in God. But he said that what he's found in his experience is when we're confronted with the thorns and the thistles, that you're more likely to turn to belief than to disbelief. And he says it's actually the broken things that draw us to faith. And it's the hard things and the bad things when we really see that the world is broken, that our heart turns to God because we want an answer to that brokenness. We know that this isn't right. We know that something's off, and it's Christ who gives us an answer to that thing that's off. And he doesn't do it far away. he did it close here, and he took the thorns. He bore the pain. He felt the rejection. He went through all the brokenness that we sense. And I just thought that was a beautiful thing. I think that's kind of what she's saying, is that that we can find in his humility the hope that will push us, that can push us towards belief.
Mm.
If that makes any sense. I don't know if I'm just rambling.
Yeah, no, I think it absolutely does. And I think sometimes, it's those are the hard things that we need and that are allowed so that we will be pushed back.
Yeah, and one of the things that you mentioned when we were talking yesterday is that the first book that we started with dealt with death and grief and these hard things. And in that book, A Hole in the World, she talked about how we try to get death far away from us. We push it away because we don't want to see it, but seeing it, seeing the hard things. And that's kind of where this book ends. If we kind of go into the next chapter, it's talking about death, which is kind of a wild thing that it sort of brought this thought full circle for our podcast this year. But I think that I don't know, how would you say this kind of, well, number one, I know this was kind of your favorite chapter. You love the secret garden.
I do.
You felt like it was a special thing just for you, sort of. But bring us into that and let us tell us what you got out of that final chapter.
Well, it was I when I read this final chapter, I was waking up and I was feeling stressed, and it was just one of those days where I was, looking in the wrong places and picked this book up, and the chapter title is The Secret Garden. And I love that story. I love that musical. It's one of our family's favorite musicals. And even the music, like the songs, like I will, it's one of those soundtracks that, I will listen to. And so just this idea, in some ways, bringing it back around to this upside down kingdom that Christ gives us. And
Mm,
she mentions this somewhere in the book. I can't remember
yeah,
where, but it is out of that. It is out of really the death that life comes.
life.
But when she compared, let's see if I can find the exact page. There's a moment where she compares, um, let's see, that one of the main characters in the Secret Garden. Um, she he he's in the garden. Why am I blanking on his name? It really is one of our favorite books. Um, but she compares this character in the book, and it's Dickon, and she talks about how he can bring life out of death, and because he can see what other people can't see. So I don't need the book. I'm not just going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So how he can, and it's like he's got this special gift, and she compares that to the gift that Christ has. Like, first of all, he sees what we don't see. So when we are feeling pain, and when we are discouraged, and when we feel anxiety or whatever, he sees, and he can bring life out of even any of that, because he is the life giver. And it made me think, there's this song that she doesn't mention it here, but it's one of his songs, and it's called Wick. And in the book, there's this idea that something that kind of looks dead but really has life in it is wick. And I don't know, because that musical is, like, we've seen it so many times and all of that. And I think about the fact that in the musical, you have a picture, you have a story of these things, this garden that was dead and overrun, and you thought there was nothing to come back to. When he gets his hands on it, kind of, and he is
Oh,
inspired, then all of a sudden, you
wow.
end up with this beautiful place that ends up restorative for this whole family, and brings together people who need each other. And so, but brings life is really the thing. And so, just for me, just kind of summarizing this whole book and saying, I know it feels like we talked about at the beginning, that you're surrendering and you're giving up the very things you have to give up, the very things that you want to hold on to, and that, that you feel like are important, and the things that you can't do without. And it's like, well, just let them die. And
Yeah,
even you may even go through this grieving of that, and then just let him do his work. Let
yeah.
him, and so, and then you
There's
will
a
find.
uh, there's a portion I want to just read it. It's a little long, but I think I've got my Kindle. It says page 201, I think. Says when we go down, God raises us up. When we submit to him, he exalts us. Andrew Murray calls this phenomenon, this way of living, a death life, a process by which we descend each day into that perfect, helpless dependence upon God, even as we trust him to raise us from the earth itself. And then she quotes from the book. I think, says Mary, the ground is full of daffodils and snowdrops and lilies and iris working their way out of the dark. Perhaps there are clusters of purple crocuses and gold ones even now. Perhaps the leaves are beginning to break out and uncurl, and perhaps the gray is changing and the green gauze veil is creeping and creeping over everything. And then Hannah says, yes, Mary, yes, it is. The ground is full of bulbs working their way out of the dark. The green is creeping over everything. And one day, Jesus' work of tending his garden will be full and complete. One day, his promise through the prophet Isaiah will be fulfilled. Your dead shall live, their bodies shall rise. You who dwelt in dust, awake and sing for joy, for your dew is a dew of light, and the earth will give birth to the dead.
That's so great. That's so
Yeah,
beautiful.
wow.
Yeah. And when we read that and we let that settle in, we're like, okay, that's what I want. I don't, maybe
Yeah,
I don't want to die and I don't want to surrender and all of that, but this is what we have waiting for
yeah,
us. So I think that's actually a great place to end, unless you have
yeah.
anything else you want to say.
No, it's beautiful. I just challenge people to read it.
Yeah,
Um, it's
agreed.
worth it.
Well, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll do a short recap of the book. And if we want to tie them into anything else we read this year. And then, like I said, then we'll just have those bonus episodes left. That's all we'll have. So, all right. Well, we'll be right back. Don't leave us yet. We have a few more things to say, but I do hope that you've enjoyed this book as much as we have. But yeah, we'll be right back after the break.
Situated in Bluefield, West Virginia, the Hopewards Writers Conference seeks to equip and encourage their patrons to tell stories of hope. This year's conference will focus on the question of living between cultures and the unique potential it holds for creativity. The conference will offer many exciting guest author speakers this year and can't wait to learn what God has been speaking into their lives. Come with us and help us tell stories of hope. LifeSprings Resources is committed to providing innovative learning resources for the local church. Our products reflect our commitment to the development of new and innovative ways to experience scriptural truth. Whether you're looking for material for your small group, need new curriculum for Sunday school, or you're just trying to stock up on church supplies, we've got you covered. Look for us online at lifespringsresources.com or call us at 1-800-541-1376, and our friendly customer service team will be happy to assist you.
Welcome back to Bring Me My Books. We're finishing the discussion on Humble Roots, and we're actually going to talk a little bit about the 5 books that we've read this year and some themes we expected, some themes we didn't, and that was kind of fun. And as Travis and I, we met yesterday to talk a little bit about today and what we wanted to make sure we covered. And that was, we were kind of wondering, and like in the sense that we were in wonder and awe at how some of these things have unexpectedly tied together. So Travis,
Yeah.
why don't you mention one of the things that either from the book, you can either jump in and say some final thoughts about the book or kind of how it all came together.
Yeah, I think there's several. Number one, I loved all the books. Really, really great. I never spent as much time with The Great Divorce. I'd read it kind of quick and hadn't spent as much time. I really enjoyed that. I loved having the person that we interviewed on come in and kind of give us some deeper insights into it. I loved Amanda's book, Hole in the World. And that I think that theme of death to life kind of played throughout the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of not avoiding death. I love that quote in Hannah's book that Andrew Murray called it the death life. That if we want life, we have to go through death. There's you know, the seed only grows if it dies and falls into the ground, you know. And then, you know, I think there's several. I think pride kind of played through, especially through the Great Divorce. So much of that was pride. Like I'll hold on to hell because I don't want to give up my pride.
Yeah.
And how there's so much peace waiting if we would just let go. And that carries into this book. The idea of like the liminal spaces, the in-betweenness, I think walked through the whole year with us. And again, I can't say how much all of this was probably just what I needed, you know, walking through liminal spaces and just thinking through, you know, so many of these ideas. So I think it was beautiful. I don't think we planned it. I think it was something that God did. How about you? What are and I may have stole several of them there, but what are the things that you found?
Well, I mean, I do think you mentioned the main things that I was thinking about, but I can only share.
Yeah, please.
Usually not with the words when it comes to books, but I think, you know, we knew that Hope Words was going to talk about those liminal spaces and talk about the in between. And so we did think about that a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't like, we knew we didn't want to exclude books that we wanted to do because of it, but we did include that. And so I think we definitely thought about Amanda's book at the beginning, A Hole in the World, is, you know, what does it mean when you're the one left and you're the one grieving and you're waiting? You're kind of between those two places. And that was I thought her book was fascinating and I loved her storytelling, but also just addressing something that we are all going to face. You know, we all will be touched by someone who we love passing on before us.
Yeah.
And so that, and then when I think about, like, I was really excited to read about Pentecost and to read one of those books in the Esau McCauley series. I think he's the editor for that, but just to learn more about Pentecost and even, you know, it is in a sense, it's still an in-between place because it is
absolutely.
like, you know, it is so already, but not yet. Like the church has begun. You know, there's the start of the church and the ushering of the Spirit and how that really changed everything. And yet it's not complete. And so that,
well, even Pentecost was this in-between place, kind of that temple idea that it was a place where heaven and earth converged, you know, and it was that overlap space and that space where something unexpected came about. So yeah, I think it's and I think we continue to live in that Pentecost, in that in-between place.
Yes, absolutely. And then culture making for me, I mean, I think that was a big book. You know, that was a big one for me. And that's the one I feel like I need to go back and reread. And it was helpful to discuss it with you, but it was a busy time for both of us. You were getting ready for Hope Words. You had a lot on your mind because you had just been to those initial tests, but you'd read it before. But I think one of the things, both humility and the in-betweenness for me in that is this is the work of God's people in this space in some ways, is kind of what I was left with. What does it mean to live creatively and, and in this culture and the way that God has designed mankind to be and live, but also knowing that it's our work will not end here, that
Yeah.
it will, it will be sustained. And so we are just kind of living in this glimpse of eternity, but diligently and creatively and all like that's when I just think back on that book, those are some of the things that
Yeah.
I come to mind.
I think there was also a sense in his that of just like living close to the ground, kind of the way that Hannah talks,
Yeah.
that, we all have this idea that we're going to change the world. But the truth is that happens in stories like Ruth, not in the big
Yes.
ways that we imagine. It's in
Yes.
those small friendships and those lifetime commitments and those multi-generational stories. That's where real change happens. And I think, we dream of all this big production value stuff, but real change happens when we put our hands in the ground, when we
Yes.
do the small things.
Totally agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the in-betweenness is obvious, probably in The Great Divorce. I don't know that I need to say.
Oh,
I
yeah.
love that book, but it is like truly an in-between place. And then just this whole like the upside down kingdom which is what she's talking about, the descending, and then Christ brings um Christ is glorified by her humility, and that's how he raises us up in that. So definitely you have that in that. And so you're right. I mean, I think I didn't really expect to have such an emphasis on pride, but looking back at all these books, and that kind of makes me think that this was the perfect book to end on, because it kind of
Yeah.
brought clarity to some of these ideas, and like just this little emphasis stamp on all
Yeah.
of the things that we've been talking about. So anything else you want to mention about our books?
I don't think so. It's um, in my mind when I think it's been fun. Like it's been so much fun. It's been fun to discuss these with you. I've looked forward to being able to do it. We've been in different places, different
Mhm.
ways. I'm so glad that everybody that's worked with us has been so flexible to do it. But it's really been fun.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, we've talked about this. I wanted to do this podcast with you, and we were, and say our friendship has developed this year, I would say.
Yeah.
And you and my husband were friends, and I think I knew Jesse a little bit better from some common gatherings that we'd had, your wife, Jesse. And so, but yeah, it's really been it's been a fun connection point. Well, okay. Last one. Well, no, not last one, because like I said, we still have a couple bonus episodes coming. But last book episode, what's your cloak or your book?
So as we get closer to the end of the year, I think I've mentioned coffee before, but I am one of those folks that likes the pumpkin spice,
Oh,
the
yeah.
autumn flavors, anything like that. So the spiced, lattes or so I've been scoping out the local coffee shops, seeing what's on the menu that you can only get this time of year, and I know it's crazy, I know it's small, but it's something that I look forward to.
Yeah. Well, that makes me think of one of our local coffee houses here in Oklahoma City's Summer Moon. If you haven't been there, you may have already been there.
Oh yeah.
It's close. It's closer to you than it is to me, or one of the locations. So yeah, they have their autumn one out. Well, I'll say mine real quick, and it does actually refer back to this earlier in this episode where we were talking about the secret garden. But because my daughter is so interested and involved in musical theater, like that has just become a big thing for our family. And we listen to soundtracks for musicals all the time in the car. We sing them as we ride, all that. But we've discovered a couple of fun, well, I don't know if I'd say they were fun. We love them. We love the music to them. A couple of fun new musicals. Again, I keep saying that word fun. They're really not. They're very deep and like in some ways sad. But The Outsiders, which is set in Oklahoma, in Tulsa, that's a new musical. Haven't seen the musical, so I can't recommend it. I have no idea, but we love that soundtrack. And then another one, Alice by Heart, which is like a kind of a new musical based on the original Alice in Wonderland. So those have just been on repeat in our car, singing at the top of our lungs. A lot of times these sad songs. So that's just been, I don't know if I'd say it's a necessity. It's probably not. Book and Cloak is more of something we feel like we really need, but it's been a lot of fun. I will say this, I do thoroughly enjoy the time with my daughter. That's really what it is bonding over that. And so that I do need. And that's just been a fun connection point for us. So anyway.
That's awesome.
Well, thanks, Travis. Thanks for going on this journey, this book journey with me. And very grateful for all that you do in the book world and the writing world and how you bring those things to attention. And so to people's attention. And so I appreciate you sharing a little bit of that with us and us being able to, well, not like it, just collaborating our partnership.
Yeah. Thank you.
So anyway, and thank you to all. If you've listened and read along with us, even if you've just read one book or listened to one podcast, we're grateful that you would spend some of your time with us. And I guess that's it. Thanks so much.